right on SC, behind the scenes. Today's episode was on world building, and we have a list at the bottom of the show notes on the blog. We did number 1 out of 10. So we're going to talk through the rest of that list here for our behind the scenes. Number 2, where do you start? As from a world building perspective, the question of where do you start is what are you the most excited about? When you come up with this concept for a fantasy world, when you have these people that are living in your brain, right? And maybe this is why that first question of like, what type of world do you want? Sounds so weird to me.
Where you start right in the middle.
Well, that's the story. You start in the middle of the story.
No,
but I mean,
you
when
start
you're
in the
world
middle
building.
of the world.
Oh, when the world has already been established.
Yes, and then build both ways out.
Okay, build back into the history and then build forward into what you want to accomplish.
Right.
Yeah, I could see that. I think whatever you're the most excited about. If it's the fashion, then start with the fashion. If it's the religion, then start with the religion. But the thing that whatever you're passionate about is going to be something that is relevant to the story. And so I'd start there. Number 3, list the rules and laws. So that you know what they are before you start writing. Do you do this? Are you a planner that way? Like, would you have this is the way things are done in this fantasy world?
Kind of. It depends on the story. I mean, again, it depends. But yeah, I think so.
We got through a whole episode and you didn't say depends today.
Well, okay, I would say you should plan it out, but don't plan it out so much that you actually spend all your energy on it, not enough actually writing the stories.
Right. You need the story first. I'll agree with that. I think listing the rules and laws so you have visibility to them and you can know like what you've said in the beginning of the story as you're like 2/3 of the way through and you don't want to be breaking your own rules. I think that's fine. But I'm not much of a planner as far as being able to spend so much time organizing this fantasy world that now I'm going to go and exist in it. I'm not like that. I would write through the story, and as things are happening in the story, then add those things to the list. Number 4, describe it. Use a writing exercise as if you were a tour guide. Here's my world.
Sure. Why not? Just, again, don't spend too much time on it.
And don't describe it to everybody you meet without actually writing the story. Can we talk about that? Because I think there's a lot of like, I have this idea for a fantasy world. And you're like, stop talking. Go write it down.
Yeah. I've had so many people. I got tons of great ideas. I just don't write it. I'm just going to sit here and gibber at you for 30 minutes and, while you don't care.
Yeah.
About all my great ideas. And then talk about how everyone else has ripped off your ideas in the past because you came up with it first.
But you never bothered to write it down.
Or use it anywhere, right.
Yeah.
And then someone else came up with the same idea. Oh, God, I know a number of people like that, and they don't listen.
Yeah.
They spend all their energy coming up with a description and then none of it actually writing because they find writing is actual work.
Yeah, it's pretty
hard.
And
they just want to have fun. I think I want to have fun. No, it's not.
Well, I mean, imagining the world can be fun, but it's when you put the pen to paper and start writing the story that exists in that world that matters. And I would say this is probably the right metaphor for it. There's a game that my daughter plays on she has a Nintendo Switch. Is that what it's called? Like a Nintendo Switch. And she plays this game, and I think I can't remember what it's called, but maybe I feel like she wanted to call it Animal Farm or something like that. But anyway, she plays this game. So she goes into the world. She gets to build the world. She gets to put, there's trees and there's water and there's a house and all this kind of thing. But nothing is happening in that world. There's no story there because there's nobody else in the world. It's just her. And it doesn't get a lot of fun until other people come in and start living inside her world with her. And so I think that's when we're writing fantasy novels, we move out of the planning and into the writing of the story. That's when it gets really fun. That's when things start to really solidify because the world has to support the story. It can't just be the world. Otherwise, you're in there, walking around, looking at trees and building stuff, but nothing's actually happening there.
Right.
All right. The next 2, 5 and 6, define the culture and define the language. What do people believe in, and how do they communicate?
All right, fine.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to, we don't want to write in our own language, but you would write in English, right? And then you would say they are speaking different languages, right, depending on where they're located. Language, remember, is regional and cultural, and so it can be really powerful to talk about how do people speak back and forth, how they communicate with one another, and whether or not they use electronic means to do so.
Or colloquialisms.
Yeah.
Idioms.
Idioms, that's a good thing. That's a good one. All right, identify the history. We talked about that. What happened and when? How were they discovered? How do they evolve? Number 8, use existing works to inspire you. We talked a little bit about that. You don't want to rip off somebody else's story, but to the extent that I mentioned on the radio, Jacqueline Carey's faith system for having this one savior type God and his apostles definitely inspired me to go, okay, here's my 3 brides that were originally Dracula, they're from the Dracula story, but they actually, the way that I tell it, there is no, the Dracula piece is sort of, anyway, long story short, point is you can use other people's work and the thing that they've done and let that inspire you to build your own. 9, describe how the characters develop. Part of your
Yes.
exercises here. Do people get a profession? Do they get married? Do they have children? Like, what is that social, what does it look like to go from being a little kid in this society? How much authority are you given? How much freedom are you given as a child all the way through to the time that you die? What does it look like for elder care, for people who have become infirm, right? I mean,
Right.
how do we care for them? And thinking about answering those questions. Those are the kinds of questions that your readers may have. Why did the grandma live with them? Why didn't the grandma live with them? These kinds of things. Your readers eventually might have these questions, and if you've already answered them or figured them out, you'll be ahead of the game. And then last is plan with caution. But I think what it actually means is that while you know everything about the world, your reader only needs to know what's relevant to the story. And if you bog us down in a lot of description about your world that is not relevant to the story, people are going to put the book down, especially if you do it early on in the book. I think you bring somebody right into the action and you talk to them. I love the way Jeffrey McGuire does this. You talk to them as if they already know these things. You don't have to explain it. You just say, this is what it is. This is how it works. And people will catch on. They'll figure it out. Anything else to add?
No, no, eventually they will. I mean, that's how Clockwork Orange kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of it, you've learned a new language. Yeah, go for it.
Be brave. Be creative. Be creative, but obviously too take your worlds to writers groups, get feedback on them, and let them tell you what they like and what they don't like. Sometimes our biases show up in these fantasy worlds that we create, and it's important to put your work in front of readers who don't look like you, talk like you, from the same place as you are, so that they can recognize those biases and tell you, hey, this seems kind of racist. Just going to put that out there. But anyway, just I would say depend on your writers group and your readers to help you out with that. Thanks for being a patron. We appreciate you. This one was longer than normal, but we wanted to get through that list. Write on sc.blog. Have a great rest of your day.